the pandemic poses a very practical question. How do you get hope in the face of an uncertain future? The secular idea of human progress was based on the idea that as knowledge increases, of course, life will get better. But it assumed that people would use the knowledge properly. It assumed the goodness of human nature. And so when you go back and say the social inequality, pandemics, the ability to destroy each other with nuclear weapons, these aren't problems that came up in spite of our increased knowledge. These are things that came up because of our increased knowledge. See, if increased knowledge was wedded to human beings that never misused it, that people shared their power and they shared their wealth, and they would never lift up, they would never go into conflict, and they didn't think of their nation over other nations, or their race over other races, or their class over other classes. If we had human beings that were good, then increased knowledge, of course, would lead to historical progress. But the fact is, it's not leading to historical progress. Which means the very idea of secular hope, which was based on the idea of knowledge and assumed goodness of human nature, is wrong. Now, Auschwitz is probably the ultimate argument that proves that the secular hope for history is dying. Every human being is capable of this evil. Anybody can do this. We are all capable of it because human nature is corrupted. And in spite of all the good that's in us, because we're made by God and we're created, the Bible says, in the image of God, nevertheless, there's something so wrong with the human heart that we're capable of that. The second problem, big problem with the secular idea of hope, is the problem of ultimate oblivion. Human beings try to take comfort in symbolic transcendence. Symbolic transcendence, that is, the idea that what we do will live on in our works, or maybe in the lives of our children. But the reality is that in the end, whether you live a life of goodness or of cruelty will make no final difference at all. If ultimate oblivion is where we're going, then ultimately it does render us hopeless. It does mean that the best you can do is do something that'll totally be forgotten. And in the long run, nothing you do, whether you're cruel or good, is going to make any difference at all. Nobody will be around to remember anything. That actually happens, by the way, sooner than the end of human civilization. Do any of you know the names of your great-great-grandparents? Not really. I don't. If ultimate oblivion and the evil of human nature, if those are real, then there's really no good reason to have hope, unless there's a God who has spoken and who has said, I'm going to bring history to a good end. Every religion offers an alternative to ultimate oblivion. Only our secular Western culture, it's the only culture in history that has said to everybody, ultimate oblivion. Ultimately, history, human beings, we go to nothing. It's really the first culture that talked about that. All other religions, all other cultures and other religions have always said there is something. But Hinduism and Buddhism, many of the Eastern religions say we live on, but we don't live on as persons. We become part of the all soul, the way a dewdrop would become part of the ocean. And therefore, even though we live on, we don't live on as persons, which means there's no love at the end of history. History does not end in love. Now, then you go to Islam, and Islam does believe that you exist personally in paradise, but it's an ethereal, spiritual paradise. Christianity, and only Christianity, believes in the resurrection, which is to say that at the end of time, God is not just simply taking us to heaven, but he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. A new heaven and new earth wherein dwelleth justice, and every tear will be wiped away, and the lion will lay down with the lamb. These are poetic images getting across this idea that the world is going to be made new, it's going to be mended. And so the future, the Christian hope, is not a consolation for the life you lost. The Christian hope is resurrection, the restoration, not only of the life you lost, but the life you never really had. It's going to be the world we always have longed for. It's the world that we always were hoping for. And it's the world, it's material. When Jesus Christ rose from the dead, he shows up to his disciples and he says, I am not a ghost. A spirit hath not flesh and bones, and he ate a fish in their presence. And in other words, it's a full hope. It's not just simply a kind of spiritual oblivion or an impersonal future. It's also not just simply going to heaven. It's a new heavens and new earth. So it's a full hope.